Hello and welcome to the episode. I am your host, Rhiannon Barry, and this is a living library of resiliency where we have creative conversations. This is episode 12, and we will be speaking with Michelle. When Michelle was a young art student taking architecture as an undergrad, it was experiencing the beautifully animated ballroom sequence in Disney's Beauty and the Beast that acted as a guide into her long-time career of animating movies. Fantastic timing and a dedication to a goal helped her to land her dream job of working as a character artist. With over 28 years at the company, she is in a managerial role, overseeing and mentoring the teams creating animated characters. Coincidingly, Michelle produces her own work as an independent artist. Her recent exhibition was titled, You Are Not Here. Her digitally enhanced photographic art is both veiled and revealing. It contains traces and whispers of secrets you may never truly unearth, but these confidences have been revealed to Michelle. She has carefully navigated the threshold between art expression and gatekeeper, exploring the notion of the off-kilter space one experiences when life perspectives suddenly shift as family secrets are revealed. Captured in her art are intrusive shufflings of the deck, broken identities, and a comprehension of uncomfortable haplessness, as well as a realization that reality has been set anew.
Thanks for joining me today, and I'm excited to talk with you because I see you've had quite the career already. And when I sent you the preliminary questions, thank you so much for being so authentic and honest with your answers. And of course, there are pieces and parts of your art that you would like to remain your own, and that is also your style of creating. So I'll definitely respect that today. And I can respect that too. As an artist, I do the same thing a lot of the time. But I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. Like when you're creating art and you're trying to veil a piece, like a story within a piece, what are the first steps that you go about trying to decide if you're going to do this, and then what approach you're going to take?
Well, first, thank you for inviting me, and I'm excited to be here and have this conversation with you. That was a long, ongoing challenge, I think, for this particular project, this body of work that I've been calling "You Are Not Here." The more specific a piece of work is, the more I think people can relate to it in a way. So I knew that, and I understood that. I knew that I wanted to be specific enough that people could see a narrative in the work. But at the same time, I wanted to kind of veil the references in a way that would allow, so I could kind of maintain privacy, essentially. Like, I didn't want to illustrate a story in a really graphic way. I wanted to reference things that people would be familiar with. So in this case, since they're stories about family secrets or about trauma in the home, using familiar objects, domestic furniture, things like chairs, which I think we all relate to immediately as like something that you sit on, something that holds you. I think we equate chairs with bodies or chairs with people. Was a one way of sort of telling a story with a figure that wasn't actually a person. And then I used kind of allegorical details to reference like stories that we might all have in our minds. If something is burning, I think, for example, we know that that's loss or destruction. If something is painted black, there's all sorts of references in that to mourning and loss. If something is alone in a landscape, then we can relate to that in a visceral way.
Yeah, and I think you're referring, I think I saw one of the pictures You Are Not Here exhibit. It's like a chair in a desert sort of setting.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it makes you really wonder, what is she thinking here, and why does she place this chair out here? And then, depending on your own experiences in life and your own understanding of symbolisms and things like that, you kind of draw your own conclusions. But yeah, definitely there's no, here's what this piece is about. And, yeah, it's not obvious at all. So it's very intriguing to look at some of your work in this series. Now, this is a solo show. And
oh, yes.
Yes. And how long have you been showing your art, publicly exhibiting your art?
For about 12 years. Recently, I had bodies of work when I was in college. They were actually different medium altogether. I made short animated films, and those were shown in film festivals internationally for a few years. And then after that, I started working, kind of full-time professionally in the animation industry. And I put my personal work aside for many, many years. And I kind of focused on that day job career. And then about 12 years ago, I started to really miss making the personal work. I had things I wanted to think about and investigate that were, that I just needed to do on my own.
Yeah.
So I started making work about 12 years ago.
About 12 years ago. And do you want to maybe tell me a little bit about how you started in a career in the arts? Because it is one of those things that, there's not often a lot of support from family, like, oh, I'm going to be an artist. I'm going to go to school for, a master's in art. So do you want to take me a little bit through maybe your childhood or teen years, or when this idea of becoming an artist really took off? And then also your choice to go to school for art-related education.
Sure. Yeah. I grew up drawing and painting, and I loved it. It was one of my favorite pastimes, that and reading. And my parents were really supportive of my artistic interests, so they put me in private classes and all kinds of, they were really, really supportive of that interest. I think
good.
As a kid, it was fantastic. And I was also I was pretty good at math and science. I was, I guess, both right brain, left brain, if we're still using those terms. And so when it came time to decide what I wanted to do, I was, to be honest, just afraid of being a starving artist. I was afraid of not having a career and a, kind of steady income and all of those things. So I actually chose to study architecture. And I got my undergraduate degree in architecture because that seemed like a good bridge between art and science and practicality and something that would, but halfway through that program, I was like, I don't think this is really what I wanted to do. And then at the same time, I was going to Texas A&M. They started a program in the College of Architecture called Visualization that was computer animation. And this was late 80s, early 90s. So it was really, really early in the days of computer animation. It was, not like Toy Story hadn't come out yet. Any of those big movies hadn't, but it still looked really exciting and different and felt like the future. And so I actually just went straight from undergrad into graduate school studying computer animation. And then sometime during that period where I was there, Beauty and the Beast came out, and there's that spectacular ballroom sequence that's computer graphics. And so I thought, well, maybe that's what I want to do. That's a career. And so I made it my goal to try and work at Disney and animation. And that is actually how old I was. 22, I think. And then I started at Disney when I was 23, going on 24.
Oh, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and it was, it was a lot of it's just good timing. It was early days in that industry. I found myself at this amazing, best in the world studio as a young kid right out of college because I just happened to have a set of skills that were new and that they needed.
Yeah,
But I've been lucky enough to kind of be there and continue working in that industry all these years.
that's awesome. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what it's like working for a large company like that, and maybe where you started and how you've promoted through the ranks and what your position entails today.
Yeah, I started as a generalist artist. I did kind of many aspects of what we would call the pipeline in computer graphics, working on the 2D films, but doing the computer graphics elements.
Mm-hmm.
And then over the years, I started to specialize in what we call look development, which is shading and texturing, grooming hair on characters. And my focus is really characters. And then at some point, I switched from kind of an artist role to a leadership role in the studio, and have been in a few different positions. Most recently, I was head of characters on Encanto, which comes out in November. And that, that switch from artist to leadership roles really, it's like it's a different job entirely. It's a different set of skills.
Yeah, anybody who's sort of, even just working in hospitality, when you're a bartender and you get promoted to bar manager, everything changes, right? Just being a leadership role just changes your perspective on everything and how you relate to other people you work with. The heavy burden of responsibilities increases. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But it's also, I think, a really rewarding role to be in. I think it's, to me, it's like a service role. It's about facilitating other people's success and creating opportunities for them to do their best work and bridging, across different departments or groups, kind of bringing people together and mentoring and a lot of other things. And so there's a whole lot of joy in that, I think, for me.
A whole skill set in being a leader. Yeah. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Now I wanted to touch on one of the things that you had mentioned just about being like during COVID and just coping with some of that stress from over the last 2 years. One of the ways that you were avoiding burnout, because I'm sure you were still working with this big project coming out. Were you working from home or were you called into the office?
No, we've been working from home since March of 2020, I guess. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, March of 2020. No, still working from home. Yeah, the majority of us are still working from home.
Okay.
And yeah, it's been a big adjustment, as I imagine it has been. Everybody has been going through some version of this. Most folks just trying to adjust to what our new reality is. The switch to working from home, right, is has its advantages and disadvantages. I think, in some respects, I don't miss the commute, and I don't, and I feel like I have more time, to myself, just simply because I'm not having to get in the car and drive. And traffic in LA is its own thing. So I don't miss that. Being on Zoom all day is a different kind of engagement. And it can get exhausting. It took me a while to adjust to that. But it also has its benefits, I think. I didn't necessarily advocate multitasking, but it's, if you're not present in a room, you can always turn your camera off for a while. You can, necessarily have to have folks staring you in the face, if you don't want to. So you can, and I've actually found in some ways it's easier for me to focus.
Yeah, especially if you're an introvert, right? This has been a little bit of a relief for a lot of people. They don't have to get up and do their normal routine of, what am I going to wear today? And, and then also like a lot of people don't like meetings. I'm not a big fan of them because I find there's a lot of like competition. But I find like in Zoom meetings, like people aren't necessarily always talking over each other as they were so much in some of the meetings that I was taking part in person. Because I don't know, there's something different between, talking to a screen versus being in a room with a lot of people trying to get their thoughts in. It's almost a little
Yeah, totally.
organized in a way.
Yeah, there's like a whole etiquette that we all had to learn. There's different ways that you can raise your hand or use the function to raise your hand.
Yeah.
You can try and pop in. I think we all had to figure out how to do that. But then I've also just noticed a lot more, just we're all trying to be really courteous. So it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. Oh, I didn't, which actually I don't think happens when you're all in the same room.
That's what I was getting. It doesn't. It's more civilized or something.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny.
The other part too is like before everybody would have their phones on the table during the meeting. Now everybody's like using their phones for the meeting. So you're not finding, I'm not finding that people are checking their Facebook or whatnot while I'm delivering like like a workshop or something. I find there's a little bit more engagement in the material itself,
Yeah, no, agree with that.
Yeah. So good things and then also bad things. So because anybody who had like social anxiety to this, and then re-entering a normal meeting situation or whatnot, it's going to be a little bit tough.
Yeah. Well, and so like I said, I'm still working from home, but I've started going back out in the world a little bit. And I had a reception for my show, and I've been going to some openings, and you just like kind of have to relearn how to talk to humans in person, how to relate face to face. It's like, oh, this is a really different experience. I'm rusty.
Sure. And then also like California, weren't you guys a little bit late in opening too? Like opening just even things like going to exhibits and things like that.
Yeah. California has been very, very kind of conservative in its approach the whole way through. We closed down early and we opened up late, and there's still a lot of things in place, mask rules and vaccination requirements and things. So it's been super cautious, and I think everyone has absorbed that. And it was important. I think it was the right approach, and we have been lucky to be quite safe. I feel, my friends, we weathered this whole thing well. And I think in part because of all of that caution. But it does feel strange to go out and be next to people, trying to, I'm sure like I've had lots of those like COVID dreams where you dream like you're somewhere and there's like tons of people around and no one's wearing masks and you start freaking out in your dream.
I haven't had one of those.
You haven't had one of those?
No.
I've definitely had those. Like, oh my God, we should be wearing masks. I've had a lot of those.
So I guess
COVID anxiety.
Yeah, I was going to say that probably adds a little bit to stress and anxiety in an environment where everybody's being so cautious. Anybody who's sort of like against wearing masks would, bring in another level of anxiety, like the social sort of what's going on between like people who believe in vaccines, whatever you believe, it's the personal thing, right? But I'm sure that brings you a lot of anxiety too if you're dreaming about being in situations where people aren't wearing masks.
Yeah. Apparently so. Those have mostly gone away as things have gotten safer and things have died down. But definitely early on, I was having those. It's funny.
Yeah. I've had a lot of different types of dreams during COVID too, but I wish I had kept a dream journal because I'm sure now, and that's one of the things I've been sort of touting too, is like, I know a lot of us during this time went through some transformations personally or some realization or dealt with some things that we had been putting off, whether it was fixing up a bedroom or fixing up yourself, right? There's a lot of people going through transitions and changes. And I think it's important not to forget those those moments of realization that you had during that time and to bring them forward into how you're going to live your life going forward. Because I see a lot of people just reverting back to their old style of life and style of living and thinking and engaging with technology and things like that. And yeah, so I think that if I had kept a dream journal, I might have a little bit more information about myself right now. Or even just a journal throughout it all. I did do some writing, but did you do any writing or blogging during that time?
Yeah, I mean, I do have a journal. I don't write in it every day, but I did. And I actually, I don't know, this probably wasn't healthy, but I obsessively tracked numbers for a while. I was keeping, especially in the first like 6 months of the pandemic, just watching what was happening, and it was a way for me to kind of make sense of it or order it in my brain. So I was tracking numbers worldwide and nationwide in the United States, and then also in California. And so I have this whole record of day to day, like what the numbers were in this journal, which, you know, is kind of morbid and distressing, but also important, I think.
Yeah, you
For
wrote
me,
it down because you felt it was important to remember.
Yeah.
Or to at least acknowledge. Well, it's sort of like when they started talking about the Spanish flu and stories started coming up and facts started coming up about that. Are like, how did we forget all this happened already? Like, how did we forget, like, that we put these protocols in for children and schools and doctors and masks? How did that get so lost? So yeah, again, it's like you don't want to overthink it, but at the same time, like things tend to just go away when I know I'm in Ontario, things opened up and the wineries were like packed, right? Like just the Niagara Falls. I lived in Niagara Falls. I moved to a town over now, but we had tourists coming from Toronto and the Greater Toronto area every weekend, packed, like thousands of people on the falls trying to escape their busy cities, finding something to do with their families, and coming all the way here and just coming to our city. And yeah, it was just nuts because we weren't going to the falls. It was
Right.
You would drive by the first few days of shutdown. I went for a car ride by it. It was the best I've ever seen it. Like I could actually see the falls. There were tourists all over, but slowly but surely, we were inundated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think people have this need to go out and have experiences, to leave their home. Once I think it's once you can't leave your home, then that's the only thing you want to do.
Yeah.
So looking for opportunities to do something out of doors. I think national parks in the United States have been overwhelmed, kind of for the same reason. It's like seems reasonably safe because you're out of doors and you can go look at something other than the walls of your home.
Yeah.
I've never been a full-time artist in the sense that I'm trying to make a living off my personal work. When I was at Disney, I was a full-time artist at the studio, working as an artist on the films full-time. And then making the leap from that role to a leadership role was definitely a reinvention for me. That was a moment where, because I was quite comfortable in that artist space. I knew it, I knew what I was doing. I was good at it, or I was productive and functioning well. And then going into something as unknown as a leadership role was scary and intimidating. Because as I said, it's a completely different job with its own challenges and rewards.
Mm-hmm.
I've never actually made the leap to full-time artist, independent artist.
Yeah. So when you do, like over the last 12 years, you've been exhibiting though. So how do you make the choice? Like now is the time I'm going to do a show, I'm going to prepare for a show. And how do you make those types of choices?
Well, yeah, so those things all run simultaneously with my day job. and that's really hard. It's hard to do both. They feel like full-time jobs, both of them. I joke about that I have two full-time jobs. So, weekends and evenings I are focused on the personal work. And, when I have a show coming up or a deadline, I might take some time off from the regular job. Occasionally I get what we call a sabbatical in my day job. So I can take like a month, which I just had in October. That's the only way I was able to really get that show up and do all the work around the show. Was that
a lot more to it, isn't there, than just producing the artwork?
Oh, there's so much. There's so much. There's promotion and social media engagement. There's having to write about it. There's preparing for interviews or artist talks, documenting the work, figuring out how I'm going to install it. And if it's a totally self-produced show, then you also have to deal with the reception and a whole bunch of other things. So
that's always the last thing I think about is putting the wire on the back. I'm like, and then I get, okay, I've booked the time to drop it off. I've done all of the work, and then I pick them up and I'm like, oh crap, there's no wire on the back of this thing. So it's just another little thing added to the list of things that need to be done for the show. Yeah.
It's a lot, and it occasionally, I mean, for sure, I get burned out, and there are moments where I have to put it aside and just take a break and like go watch a movie or walk around the block or something.
Because other people involved are working probably just as hard as you, and they're not going to tell you to take care of it. Like, go take care of yourself. You're working really hard to get this out, but there is a hustle around getting a show or getting some work together that it all culminates in this beautiful thing, comes out the other side, and it's this show and this achievement, and then there's sort of like that down afterwards. Right?
Yeah. Can we talk about post-show funk?
Yeah. Talk about that. There's a lot of for me that not necessarily showing, because I haven't done like big shows, but I've done like little exhibits or taken part in themed exhibits. And for me, it's like imposter syndrome after the fact. Like, oh, did I just do that? Oh my God, that's so embarrassing. Why did I put that out? And I have to get over that. So, but when I'm all wrapped up in the hustle of it, I'm fine. Yeah, it's only after.
Yeah, definitely. So imposter syndrome is a very real thing. As old as I am, I still struggle with it. In all my aspects of the work that I do. It's and I realize it, and I know that it's happening, and I can identify it when it happens, but it's still it's just kind of ingrained, especially I think often with women. You sort of grow with certain set of expectations or the expectations, maybe is a better way to say it. And so when you reach out and you put yourself out there, and you kind of promote yourself in various ways, it always feels a little strange, a little like you might be overreaching. I don't know. I feel that way often, but.
Well, it's hard to make space for yourself as a woman. I know that you're a little bit older than me. But like, even for me, like I grew up in the 80s as a child, and in the 90s, a little bit, still gender roles were placed on most of the things that I did. I remember wanting to be something creative and being told, oh, you're really good at keeping the house, or, just here, learn how to sew, sort of thing, which I don't regret learning how to do those things. Just, I know that it wasn't like for my brother, something that was expected was different. Like, it wasn't, well, Rhiannon's going to go into business. Right. So I know that. But then like in the 2000s, it got a little bit better still. And I was able to make my own choices and become a little bit more independent. So that was good. And then, over the last, I don't know, 5 years with the whole Me Too movement and different feminist movements. I find like I'm really throwing caution to the wind a lot of time with my choices and how loud I'm being in my truth.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that do you find it similar for you having sort of a same sort of pattern of seeing the gender roles
Yeah.
a little bit more loosened?
Yeah. For sure, it's better. Um, yeah. So I grew up in the 70s and 80s. Um, I certainly remember lots of experiences as a kid, sort of those playground experiences that you deal with, um, I don't know, harassment and I also went through a period of time where I was misidentified as a boy a lot. I was just this kind of gangly, tall for my age, skinny kid with short hair and glasses, and so I got misidentified
Did
for a few
somebody cut
years.
your hair? Did you get a home haircut?
No, it wasn't a home haircut. It was kind of it was modified Dorothy Hamill. I don't, who knows why it went that way. But I also I was a tomboy. I would dress, I didn't like dresses particularly, or I didn't tend to wear them that much. So that happened. I wouldn't say that was exactly traumatic, but I definitely remember it being frustrated at the time. Like, why would you make this assumption?
Really know the difference, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I think I
I
went
don't
through
know.
that as a child. I got mislabeled as a boy a few times.
Yeah. So I think it was like those early experiences that made me realize how much there's just expectations of how you would express gender, and there's like certain trappings and like outward appearance stuff that seemed to be really important. And I found that kind of frustrating at that age. And then as I grew up, I just, I had these are very common experiences, but just variations of the, just because you're a woman kind of conversations. I remember in college, I had a professor that was a drafting class, and he told me that I was a pretty hot pencil for a girl. And he kind of meant that, I'm sure, as a compliment, but it was quite a ridiculous thing to say. And so
By
those,
today's norms, a teacher would never say that.
right. I mean, even the phrase hot pencil is weird, but yeah, the for a girl it's when I think about it in retrospect, it's kind of stunning. And at the time, we just laughed it off like, oh, that old guy. But at the same time,
yeah.
right? Yeah, it sticks with you, and it has an impact that that you sort of internalize. So
Yeah. And then it depends on who's around you that maybe stood up for you or empathize with you at the time as well. Like if it happens in front of somebody that's like a friend that's a male and they don't say anything, that can have an effect on you as well. And I know that sounds cliche, but it really does.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then, as the years have gone by, I've been working in spaces that were, just statistically primarily male. And there have been times when I've been the only female in the room. And I grew quite used to that, even in school. The course of study I chose, architecture, right, is a kind of male-dominated field. And I even remember my mom telling me that people had told her that I would never find a husband.
Oh no!
And that if I pursued that course of study, and I thought that was funny because it was like, but I'm surrounded by guys.
But nowadays, a guy would like cling on to you if you were going to school for architecture because it's like, wow, she's gonna have a great career.
Yeah. It was just a different way of thinking about things, and to some degree, you just let that stuff roll off your back because it's ridiculous. But they're cumulatively, the effect can, I think, lead to this, questioning or this lack of confidence, or that you. So if I were to point to anything, I suppose maybe that's where that imposter syndrome comes from. It's just well, maybe, maybe.
Yeah, maybe it has something to sort of base it in being just a woman.
Right.
And then add artist on top of that, which is a very exposing like choice of work.
Yeah.
So like,
And I'd say,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I think I see less in that in younger generations, but I do still see it. I still see it in some college students when I work with them, especially women. I see it in the way that they write their letters. If they're writing a letter of application for something, I can see it in there. I can,
Hesitancy, but do I belong?
Hesitance. Yeah,
the space.
Exactly. Yeah. Kind of qualification in the language.
It's so hard because like sometimes you do take the space and you be authentic and you stick up for your beliefs in yourself and what you know is right and where you want to be in the world and you work towards that. And sometimes it backfires, right? So it's hard. It's about lived experience as well. Like maybe they've already had a setback, right, before writing that letter.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many different reasons for it, but I usually say, like, I'm really excited. I have a 15-year-old and he's right into animation. So he'll be excited to know that I spoke with somebody who's working in animation at Disney, because that's pretty much what he does with all his free time. And he's learning coding right now too. But like, I have hope for that generation because like some of the stuff that comes out of his mouth, or like I'll pick him up in the car and he'll tell me about debates he's had in French class or English class. And I'll be like, wow, it's so much different. So much different already. Like, but then I'll talk to some of my like friends. They'll be like, no, mine is like this. And I'll be like, okay, I don't have as much hope anymore now. Right. Some of the stuff. So it's hard to say because it's a lot of who you're surrounded by. I still see, in certain cultural groups, women definitely like years behind anything that I've enjoyed. But then I see this younger generation that my son's involved with, and he's telling me he doesn't like, he's being like really cognizant of whether he's going to use they or her or him, to kids that he's known his whole life. And that at least there's like at least 20 kids in his school who he's not sure of what to call. So I'm like, wow, that's really progressive.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but either way, it's progressive.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I like even the idea that that he wonders or he wants to know or he's curious, like it's right. That there's a possibility that there isn't just a he or a she. Right?
Yeah. That he's like thinking critically at such a young age.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think back to that and I think I was just running on like survival mode, I feel, throughout my teenage years. Like I didn't stop, and I guess I did have some critical thoughts along the way, but not like how I'm seeing. And then, some of my friends' kids too, like my one friend has a son who's taking coding and stuff like that in school. And just the way he speaks, it's different. He carries a lot more responsibility than I did at that age. And maybe technology has something to do with that, a wider worldview, maybe.
Yeah, I can imagine. You certainly have much more access to information, and good or bad, you have it's not like when I was growing up where you had the set of encyclopedias and the library.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah. And you had to, that was so time consuming, wasn't it? No wonder why the world's working faster these days. Like you can write a paper in like 2 nights if you need to, right? Versus, sitting in the library for a week trying to find things, and just like, it's crazy how much has changed. And even just for me, like I said, like I'm 38 and the world has changed so much in the way that we do things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now your show, is it showing right now?
It closed at the end of October, so it was up and then
so like the theme though of the show, we talked a little bit about a little bit about like the idea behind it, but the theme was a lot of personal experience with family history and secrets, and how family secrets become revealed, and that changes the perspective of a person. And then and we talked a little bit how we disguise those things too in our, how we veil them in the beginning. But as far as how it changes the perspective of a person within the family, do you want to elaborate a little bit on how you were trying to convey that in your art?
Yeah. It's it's kind of a complicated feeling, and I was trying to figure out how to really get at and how to show what I felt, when I heard these stories, either stories that my friends would relay to me about experiences they had in their own family, or experiences or discoveries I might have made with my own family history. When you learn something that you didn't know, especially if it's a a dark secret or something that's kind of devastating, or it really does call into questions, like things that you might think about a person. It might call into question the memories that you have of your childhood. It might, so it sort of kind of rocks your foundation a little.
Yeah.
And memory itself is slippery and strange, and anyway, and it changes over time. And so I started to think about like how we think about our childhood, and through the lens of nostalgia. And nostalgia, particularly in the sense that nostalgia is a longing for a time that never really was. And I found that as a concept really useful. And there's a book by Susan Stewart called On Longing that was a text that I just kept going back to as I was developing this project. It's like
what was the name of the book?
It's called On Longing by Susan Stewart. It's a really dense piece of writing, but she digs into that idea of nostalgia being something that wasn't really ever there. So you're right. Right. It's like viewing your past through the family album.
Yeah.
And all snapshots, everyone's like smiling, everyone looks happy. And what you don't see are the moments before and after, or in between, when things, snapshots and family albums and memories tend to latch on to a lot of the kind of positive, and your brain wants to filter out the negative. And then when you're confronted with something like a revealed secret, it kind of forces you to reevaluate all those things and think back, maybe this wasn't as rosy as I thought it was, or whatever. So then in the work, that also led me to this idea of the uncanny, and we can talk about Freud if you want, but the uncanny is essentially the idea that something that you're familiar with has suddenly become unfamiliar. And if you've ever had that experience where like
strange phenomenon,
right? It's weird. It's like there's a word that you like, a common word that suddenly looks like it's spelled wrong, or you write it down too many times and it starts to just become abstract and not make sense. It's like familiar, but now it doesn't make sense anymore. Mm-hmm. So through my imagery, I'm just trying to essentially create scenarios where there are familiar objects, but in unfamiliar configurations, or in an unfamiliar setting.
So that's what you were thinking with the chair.
Right. So why, putting something like a chair out into a completely uninhabited space definitely makes that chair and that space seem unfamiliar. Like those two things together are strange. And then I also intentionally played around with scale. So I used, those objects are mostly dollhouse miniatures that I photographed and then scaled up to human size and digitally composited into the background. And so the longer you look at the image, the more weird they seem to be. And you might initially accept this idea that like somehow I dragged a piece of furniture out into the
Yeah, I
desert and
did.
took a photo of it. And I think when you're looking at the images digitally or like online, they're more convincing. But then when you see them in person, if you look at them a little bit, you start to see like, oh, that shadow's not quite right, or
Yeah.
I see this texture that like is the wrong scale, and then hopefully that creates that weird feeling, that same like
Yeah.
I've read this word 100 times, but now I don't know what the word means, or it
Yeah.
doesn't look right.
Okay, that's very cool. Yeah. Yeah. You made me think of it because the word example. I remember one time I was writing and this one word just I couldn't figure out how to spell it. And it was the word of. And for some reason, it escaped me entirely. And I put UV as a placeholder because I couldn't remember how to spell of. I was like, what is happening right now?
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's the feeling. It's like,
Yeah,
I know this, but I don't know it. It's like
what
my
is my
brain is.
reality like coming apart?
Yeah, yeah. So exactly, like it's like a shifting reality. And I like that coming apart. I feel like that's what I was trying to do, is like my reality or my friend's reality of their, experience of their life is dissolving, or it's even like it's kind of oscillating.
Yep, there's lots of family secrets out there waiting to come out with those DNA tests nowadays too. The was it 23andMe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and ancestry, definitely. Yeah, and I've had those experiences too. And my extended family has, where you just find relatives that you didn't know you had.
It's crazy.
That's
right?
always interesting. Yeah, yeah. And those have been positive experiences actually. But but at the same time, it's like, oh well, I didn't. Huh. Okay.
That's cool. Yeah.
So and so, it was wide ranging. Their life experience. Like, okay.
Yeah, we do a
A lot
family
of
reunion now with based on one of our. I think it's like my cousin, one of my grandfather's brothers, granddaughters found us, and then that just expanded to finding other kids, and then now we have a family reunion every couple of years based on that finding.
Yeah, yeah. I know. It's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. But there are still more secrets to be unveiled, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Positive. Especially like when you go back in human history to all of the DNA, like people had to hide pregnancies and people had to get pregnant to survive. And, the royals are all, are they really royal? Or there's just so much that DNA could reveal. It'd be really interesting for the royal family to get a DNA test and then make it public.
Oh yeah.
Blood.
Let's see. What is that lineage really all about?
Yeah. Like you have 6 sisters who are all also cousins, and yeah.
I discovered things through ancestry that were interesting, and like a long ago ancestor had kind of lied about their age in order to get married. They got married very, very young, kind of shockingly young, before making a trek across the country as a settler. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Kind of stories that, and then kind of side branches, and also discovering just like what my family did and what their
You
occupations
traveled
were.
a lot, no, in your life, like.
I have traveled a lot, and I moved around a lot as a kid, so I didn't it's hard for me to like say I have a hometown. I have several hometowns. I was born in one state and then moved around
Where
several
did your
times.
family like first settle in the States?
Like ancestrally?
Yeah.
The South, I think. Virginia, Alabama,
Okay.
the Carolinas. I think they all immigrated into southern states and then moved from there. And I have family scattered across the country.
Yeah, sounds like you guys were pioneers.
There's even the story of like the stowaway. There's like a kid who was a stowaway on a ship. And I think I found that person in my research, which is kind of interesting.
That's cool. Yeah. I mean, even like just with Remembrance Day just happening here, I don't know what it is in the States, but ours is Remembrance Day on the 11th. And just like thinking back about like 15, 16-year-olds who were fighting in the war, like people just had to do what they had to do. Like if you needed to be a draft dodger, then you needed to do that. If you needed to come from, your parents sent you on a boat as a stowaway so that you could have a better life, then that's what you did. Like life was so much different and difficult back then. These stories
for sure.
Interesting to us because we could never imagine them like having to live them.
No, definitely. That's true.
So do you think the ancestry investigation kind of spurred some of the pieces in your exhibit?
Yeah, somewhat. Yeah. And definitely in the abstract, it did. Each piece in the show has some kind of story attached or some specific memory, childhood memory or story attached to it as the starting point for generating the image. There's a chest of drawers in there somewhere that's like a replica of one that I had as a kid, kind of relating to a time when I was a child, when I was struggling with loss, I guess that's for lack of a better word. So and loss and illness. So I could like talk about each one individually, but a lot of them it's like, well, I don't really want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Just and again, the whole one of the challenges really for the project is, and that I've navigated the whole way through, is that I will, it's personal, and I want to keep the work personal and private. Like it's not so much about airing dirty laundry, mine or anyone else's.
Yeah.
And some degree, some of the stories are because they're other people's stories.
Yes.
It's not necessarily my story to tell, but as a witness or a participant or a confidant, the story is still internalized. I still have it. Like I still hold it.
Writers sort of struggle with this too, don't they?
Yeah. And I remember going to a talk with a writer who wrote very, deeply personally revealing stuff about her entire family, and she was just like, this is what I do, and it's, and essentially it's like I'm really paraphrasing, but she's like, it's my business because it's my story too, and I'm going to write about it, and a little bit of like everybody else be damned.
You got to be a little
not quite that aggressive, but
got to be a little bit couth. I think some people write for shock value and whatnot too. I did have a writer on the podcast who said the same thing as you. Like, it's not everybody else's story to share. So maybe that happened to me, but maybe it shows up in a story where the main character is a girl instead of a boy. And maybe it happens in this time instead of this time, and in this way instead of this way. But those experiences are what I put into the art. And you can take from it what you want. So I thought that was really inspiring. And it gave me a different perspective too, because I used to write a lot. When I was first in school, I took journalism. And, but that was one of those other things too. It was a practical version of what I wanted to take, right? Because I was always told I should be a creative writer, but I just went for journalism. Like, okay, that makes more sense, right?
Yeah.
But I recently got back into writing during the pandemic, and I started writing from a fantasy point of view, but using my stories and characteristics of people who were in my stories. And so him saying that really made me realize how, because I was struggling with, like, how do I do this? Like, people are going to know. They're going to know. And I'm just, and so him saying that really put me on a different track. Yeah. And
yeah,
thing as you do with your art, I hide things in it with my visual art. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, I'm okay with the fact that people will look at one of these images and write their own story or come up with their, that what the most that I hope for is that they feel a feeling that's similar to the feeling that I feel.
Yeah.
Right. And looking at the image that they experience that emotion or that, discomfort or whatever it is that I'm trying to get at. But the story I think is wide open, and that's fun. It's interesting too when people tell me what they see.
Yes.
I'm always fascinated in what they relate or what they pick out of an image. And it's surprising to me how like accurate it often is, even though it's, like you said, so
you think you're not being transparent, but sometimes,
right. It's still all there. So,
yeah. So then that brings me just to artist statements. Now, I dislike, not because it's work and it's hard to do, but I just dislike saying, okay, well, like, I dislike giving everything away. And like, it's just, I feel like you feel similar. It's almost too much sometimes. And then the mystery is gone.
Yeah. I don't know. Artist statements are hard. They're so hard. They're always in some way kind of reductive. Like you're trying to sum up something that's really complicated. The elevator pitch is it the same way. And I've never been great at that, particularly with this body of work, because I just feel like there's all these ideas I have to introduce and talk about to get to the meat of the thing. And I can say it's about family secrets, and it is.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's a little, I don't know. So yeah, I struggle with how much to reveal.
Definitely. Time and column inch space, right? Like, yeah,
that too. Word counts, and and everybody wants a different amount of information from you. And I also
too, when you have like you have written this big thing for the show, and then like maybe some media outlet wants 250 words. It's like,
right.
How do I
how do I edit this down? I have literally like 50 versions of that artist statement.
Yeah. See, that takes a lot of time too. People don't realize how long that takes. Or your artist bio.
Same. Right? Yeah. Same thing. And I think I also, I struggle with like, because I have like these two aspects of my life, whether to combine them or keep them separate. And that's true across like social media and website and bio, and
that's difficult too.
Applying for residencies and like all of those things.
I know now I have so many freaking social media pages and I'm just like, I don't know. But like, then do you listen to the rules that other people tell you about best practices and advertising, or do you do what you want as an artist and you this is how I want to present myself?
Well, I mean, I guess a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I only have one Instagram account. Just that's all I can manage.
Yeah, I gave up my personal one and turned it into my artist one. Yeah. I was like, no, I can't.
I've, and I find social media a little bit exhausting. Just
Did you get on the TikTok trend?
no,
Neither did I.
no.
Yeah, everybody's like, "How to do TikTok?" I'm like, more time consuming stuff.
Yeah. I'm, I just managed to like start posting some reels on Instagram. I feel like that was a big step for me. Just like, okay, I should engage in this. And it's primarily personal art, but occasionally there's some crossover with my my day job in that feed. But yeah, I tried to maintain a personal Facebook page for a while too, and I just didn't see the value in that. So
I don't think it's going to be relevant much longer. I don't know which way Facebook's going, but I think it's like, I don't know. I haven't read enough about it, so I won't comment. But I don't think it's
on the metaverse.
Yeah, we're living in a metaverse already. So I did comment, sorry. Because everybody's presenting their ideal self already. Right? This is just like upping that. But as far as it being a place to host a business page, I'm worried about that. And I've already experienced some censorship, which stops me from promoting.
Mm-hmm.
So, all I'm trying to do is promote a podcast to reach other artists with artist stories and maybe share some peer tips. And I got censored.
Mm.
So I was like, what's going on Facebook? So I'm pretty sure that one I'll be hanging that one on a hook pretty soon.
Yeah, that happens a lot. I feel like with unfortunate regularity, someone that I know is getting censored or gets censured or gets, a warning or, a post or an image.
And the only thing I could think of is that I used the image from somebody's art display that had some nudity in it, but that person's page is full of that art display.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just kind of confused by that. So maybe that's not it. And also people can report you. So your competitors can report you too. You know what's going on out there. So censorship, no good for arts. So Facebook becoming no good for selling art.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that you get leads off of Facebook or Instagram?
Not Facebook. Instagram has been great for just engagement and finding other artists and, discovery and having conversations. I feel like selling work has always been an in-person endeavor for me. It just works best out of studio. So I have, I do my work in this amazing collective space called the Keystone Art Space. It's a big group studio. So there's something like 60 artists in this building. We all have, little individual spaces. And pre-pandemic, we would have these big open studio events that were fabulous. So you get lots of new people coming through and just looking at the work. And there's a gallery space there. So we can show our work in the gallery and we have group shows. And that lots of sales have come out of that.
Oh, that's great.
Space. Yeah. And it's interesting how often someone will see the work and then they'll go away. And then 3 months later, they'll come back and say,
that's what it's all about.
Thinking about this thing and I want to have this thing. And that's marvelous. That's really great when that happens.
Yeah, I do think that's wonderful that it works like that. And a lot of times, when I was first starting, people would say, well, artists do this for exposure. And I'm just like, yeah, but like, you can't like live off of exposure, right? So, exposure is a funny thing. One, you do need it because people come back, people get familiar with you. They think of you for certain projects or purchases. But a lot of the times I think the word exposure is just used too much to get people to do things for free or like to participate for free. And I think, like, I don't know, I just published a blog post this morning because I was really thinking about all the times. Like, I've had some really great partners on projects because I'll do like community art projects or run workshops in the community as well for like wellness and art. And there have been so many times where I'm just like, yeah, I really want to do this. I want to be part of this. No worries. I've had a great experience when I leave, and they've even promoted me or used me for a paid project later on. And that's the balance that you have to take on. But then there are some that just like don't even like consider like what they're asking of you, because no fault to them either. But like there's a lot of time involved in these things, a lot of expenses involved. There's often mileage, promotions on your end, things like that. So there's a lot more involved than, just come and we'll put your art piece up in its exposure.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe that artists should be compensated, right, for their work.
I do too.
Should be compensated for their time. And I think there's a whole industry around taking money from artists as opposed to giving money to artists. There's a lot of galleries that are set up that way. There's
isn't that the traditional
show,
sense
right?
Of galleries? Is you pay for rent for a wall, you show your things, and then if anything sells, they keep a certain percentage.
Well, there is that is a business model. I think professional galleries that what you might call a blue chip gallery, those are galleries that represent the artists, and they do take a commission, right? They take 50%, but they don't charge the artist for the wall space. Charging an artist for wall space means that you are probably not really trying to sell the work. You're making your money off of charging the artist's rent,
right?
So that's a business model that I try to avoid. I think I'm really choosy about jury shows. I'm really choosy about
these shows. You have to pay like $1,000 to enter. Like what?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. I avoid things like
how
that.
important are awards to you?
Well, I guess it depends on the kind of award. If it's like it's a grant, those are amazing. Those are kinds of awards. I think an award given in a juried show that's always nice.
It's attached to the monetary award, right?
Monetary award, yeah. I think though those awards are often funded off of the entry fees to the show. So
yeah, exactly.
It becomes a kind of de facto artist supporting artists.
It's just keeping it within the same like financial network, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so all of those systems or ways of getting work out, I mean, they have their merits, but also they can be problematic. And I think a lot of artists don't realize that there are other avenues, that there are actually venues that have stipends and money for support. I think a lot of university galleries, for example, often have a small budget that can help cover like shipping and other upfront costs that the artist might have. Those are great places to investigate.
Yeah. Otherwise, you can find, like, again, more work. You can find some grants for yourself and put time and energy into that, making your own opportunities, which is a lot about, being an artist is about that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you can, you can self-produce a show. You could have a show out of your garage and invite everybody. There's lots of ways to show your work that,
now with
that are outside the system. Yeah.
It's better to see it in person though.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody always tells me whenever they see my stuff, like, I'm going to a gallery later today to drop off 3 pieces. Every time I've gone in there with work, they're like, wow, this looks so much better in person. Like, thanks, kind of.
Right? Yeah. I think I always had that experience. Even there's just something about the object, or even if it's a video, seeing the video projected. There's something about it being in a space that
a large space. Yeah.
Changes your perspective for sure. And it's always hard to assess scale. I mean, if it's a large image, you won't have that experience, that sort of sensory experience.
Yeah, for sure. It's like looking at a Monet, right, in person. It's ginormous versus seeing it on, your computer screen or in a book. It's just kind of neat and compact.
Yeah, exactly.
What advice would you give a young animator who wants to work at Disney one day?
Yeah, it's in the broadest sense, being passionate about it and practicing every day are probably both the things I would say. So, really the animation as an umbrella or as a process is comprised of a lot of different kinds of specialities, of which like animation, as you think of it, like animating the character is one. So in any given discipline, it's like watch as many movies as you can, look at all the art books, draw all the time. Even though what we do is digital, and we don't draw so much anymore, we do things on the computer. Having that sort of being adept at a visual communication form, because it's fundamental. So draw, watch, read, and practice. And
the education piece?
The education piece is very important. And again, depending on the sort of focus or discipline, you might choose a different school. But I'm a big fan, a big proponent of going to college, of getting a degree. I think college is the it's kind of where you learn how to learn. It's where you learn how to ask questions and you sort of learn a certain amount of independence. You learn how to communicate and work with others. Disney is hugely collaborative, and I think you learn those skills in college. I always recommend that students like try to work together on a project, and a lot of schools are oriented that way anyway. They do group projects, because you will be working in a group like the rest of your life in your career. You'll always, you'll be working with other people. So learning those skills and learning how to navigate those relationships are really important. And then, cultivate your curiosity and grow comfortable with the idea that you're always going to be learning, that the learning doesn't stop once you get the job.
Yeah.
So those are all things. I think there's a lot of specifics about like software that we use and, tools and stuff, but a lot of that is also in-house and you will learn on the job.
Go through the training.
I don't typically, through the training. So I don't typically, it's like, go out and learn, Maya or whatever. That's maybe less important than just learning something and understanding how to learn.
Yeah. And then maybe from your perspective, learning how to let go of being the person who's doing the actual work as you progress through your career. I know a lot of people enter into these types of things thinking they're going to be the director and the artist and everything, right? But you need to learn how to delegate.
Yeah, definitely. And how to like trust your coworkers and trust others. How to be comfortable giving things up and giving things away, right? If you want to find yourself in a leadership role. And there's just not enough time in the day to do everything.
That's good advice.
so, get help.
Pace yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for chatting with me. Is there anything else you want to add?
I was thinking, before coming into this conversation, thinking about the role of art making as a therapeutic exercise. and and whether going through this project was a therapeutic exercise or not, or was it was it in itself traumatic? It's probably a little bit of both. I think, digging into something that you may not want to think a lot about, it's hard at times, like emotionally draining.
For sure.
But it was also, it was like, it was a way to also kind of confront these things and work through some of it.
Yeah.
And come out the other side having, I don't know if healed is the right word, but at least come to terms with things that have happened.
Yeah. That sounds right. Like there's a lot of just like residual healing type benefits of arts participation, or even just being exposed to art and being surrounded by art. But also just sort of getting lost in the creating process. I know for myself when I'm painting, I can go like 2 or 3 hours. I've gone like 6 hours sometimes. And then your mind, it's like a good yoga session. It just wanders to whatever's bothering you that you need to work on, right? But if you're taking this material head on, you're immersed in it, that you can't escape dealing with it. And it's a healthy thing to do. It's very similar to, talk therapy, only you're talking to yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a good analogy, and it was hard and distressing, certainly at times.
So now you have to release all that, right? You have to find your next exhibit's going to be about releasing all of this.
It makes sense.
Yeah,
happy art
serves you.
Yeah, I don't know. And I one of the conversations that I had, this project that we're talking about was originally for an MFA thesis. At the end of that, there was a bit of conversation about like, am I done with this? Or is there more to say?
Yeah, that's interesting.
And it's a question that I think is still open. Like I don't think I'm done. But maybe the way I express it or think about it has changed.
That's great. Yeah, that's growth, right? Yeah. So some of that stuff probably doesn't have its like hooks in you so deep anymore. Yeah, that's good. I went through a lot of that in my art making during COVID. Yeah, I released a lot on the canvas. Yeah, for sure. And my perspective on the other side, and we've been pretty open for a while now, but still like, my perspective on the other side is, that I did grow a lot during that time through my art.
Yeah. So. For sure. I think that's true and kind of inevitable when you work through a project like this that you're gonna.
If you're taking on, I know one of the theme this year for the City of St. Catharines Mayor's Juried Art exhibit was resiliency. I took advantage of doing like a quasi self-portrait, of somebody going through a creative, going through COVID. And a lot of us that had done workshops and a lot of other artists, like whether it was plays or musicians or, digital artists creating these posters and large scale murals outside and stuff, the world relied a lot on us. And we have already been through so much as artists being like rejected and this self-doubt and the precariousness of work, that we were soldiers ready for battle. But that stuff catches up with you, because that went on forever, those social restrictions. So I wanted to encompass all of that in one painting, and I think I did it. And I got picked for one of the pieces in the show. So that was delightful and exposing.
Right? Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. It was pretty cool. All right. So, well, thank you so much for being so honest today and sharing your perspectives and your experiences and your advice on upcoming people who want to be in anime. Because I know quite a few who do. It's a big field, right? Like,
yeah.
a lot of kids want to enter it. So
It's fun. It's a lot of fun.
it's great. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And feel free to check in anytime you have a new exhibit.
Awesome. Thank you. I enjoyed this conversation.